Hello, everybody. It is John Pollock here with your post-daily news show for Thursday, March the 17th. A pleasure to be joined. Stepping in for Wei Ting, who will be back later today with the wellness policy. You know him, you love him. From pwtorch.com, the man behind the deep dive with Will Cooling, everything with Rich and Wade. He is Rich Fann, who is joining us. Hello, Rich.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that, and Will's going to appreciate that because he's slowly moved from being the co-host to now slowly owning the deep dive, which is my goal, because that way I can then go to sleep.
A nice slow transition of power in the in very much the theme of Succession, which Rich and I spoke about not too long ago, and then we got to see it really right there in the flesh on that Pat McAfee interview, and you can certainly see the body language. Vince McMahon aware of Succession. Don't know if he's binged it all, but you could see that was a show that he had an understanding of what it was that Pat McAfee was referencing.
Oh yeah, the fact that he saw that but then didn't see Young Rock and the person playing him in Young Rock was also very, very fun for me.
Yeah, that was great. One that he actually has like a stake in, and there's a guy playing him. No, haven't seen it at all. But we have lots to go into today, and we're going to be chatting about a variety of topics. And we wanted to just start off with some of your thoughts coming out of St. Patrick's Day Slam on Wednesday night. Wayne and I went through the show. It was the show that was all built around Thunder Rosa with a pretty hot crowd in San Antonio. And how did you think the whole coronation of Thunder Rosa was executed?
Well, I mean, I listened to you guys last night, and one of the first things I agreed with was the fans made that show and made that match in particular. I couldn't imagine them being in the old Daly's Place and having that sort of a raucous crowd with the so little numbers they had during COVID. And so I thought that was the first thing. And second, I thought Britt and Thunder Rosa really brought their A game to that match. I thought that even the interspersal of how Britt and Aubrey have issues with each other, and how that was pulled in, and the and how she had to be the second ref. I saw a buddy of mine on Twitter tweet to Aubrey at the beginning of the match, "I really wish you had been calling this match instead of the other referee." And then when she came in, it's like, well, you got your wish. It's like it was a very natural way for that to happen. And then throughout the show, the 6-man tag, the Hardys, my colleague over at the Torch Cam noted that, I don't know. I mean, most of us, as we get older, things change. But I don't know how Matt Hardy could fit in that same spandex. And the spandex is still as stretchy as it was like 25 years ago. But God bless him for it. And the try having kids now, and his reaction on Twitter of, "I will have a 5th child just to spite you, Private Party." So yeah, top to bottom, I really enjoyed the show.
Yeah, the Hardys are going to be like a really interesting act to watch. I mean, it just incredibly popular to that San Antonio crowd, and it was like they had to do very little, but they got the maximum reaction from that audience. And it just seems to be always like the juggling that AEW has, where it just seems constant replenishing of this roster and then some, and where your Hardys fit in, because that's obviously, not an inexpensive acquisition either in a Jeff Hardy, that you need to earmark that television time to justify that signing. And it's once again that whole kind of balancing act that Tony Khan has on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and I thought between them and Jericho, it was very funny that I had mentioned this a couple of weeks ago talking with Wade. There is this idea that AEW doesn't do sports entertainment. They just do wrestling, all wrestling, nothing but wrestling. And it's like, they do it too, guys. It's okay. You can do it good. And that's what they proved last night. You had the Hardy Boys do what we usually would complain with WWE, which is take an act, go to its most salient, rememberable roots, and show that as like a highlight package to the audience and say, hey, remember when? And they did that. But then on the flip side with Jericho, I got a little nervous when he started mentioning January 6th, but then he brought it back around and talked about the car accident of several years ago, not the weirdness of my country here and the things going on that date. And I tweeted to Wei this morning, because as I was getting ready for work, I was listening to you guys review it, and I choked on my tea as I was listening to him talk about the daddy and
Daddy Magic,
Daddy
and
Magic,
Cool Hand Ange. Yes,
the fact that his name is Daddy Magic is just That is such a WWE. Here's you got 17 names, pick 3, and then we're gonna pick the ones you didn't pick, and that's gonna be your name.
Yeah,
And
I considered, before they beat them to it on Dynamite, I thought you and I maybe could subtitle
that could be our
the
tag
show.
team.
Yeah,
finish.
but you and I, we have some of that daddy magic, I think, as well. So, if you were to just lay out that kind of a segment, that we're going to put together a group that are going to be the sports entertainers of AEW, my probable natural inclination would be to roll my eyes, but in seeing it executed the way it was on Wednesday, I thought it was like a really strong segment led by Jericho, and you had like a purpose for the team. These are not just random figures that are being saddled with Jericho. Each has their role, their reasoning for it, and I think like for nothing else that Jericho is going to be heavily involved in this and helping these like get 2.0 to the next level specifically.
Yeah, and they went from guys that he called Terrence and Phillip to giving them a journey of where they were, his friend Kevin inspiring him to bring them along for a ride, and now wherever they finish in this Jericho finishing school, they're going to be better off for it. I would say Proud and Powerful probably didn't get the most from that time with Jericho compared to, say, a Sammy, or even an MJF. But I think in the long run, it's going to help them. But I really do think 2.0, whether it's the bad creative line or bringing in how much that they're going to be more of themselves from the indies, like the Canadian indies or PWG, and they get to be a little bit more of an edge. I think despite having the nickname Daddy Magic and Cool Hand Ange, they're going to be able to show a little bit more of their personality in ring as well, not just be the comedy foils or the goons for Jericho.
Yeah, we'll see if any Daddy Magic or Cool Hand Ange chants erupt at any of these future AEW shows. Moving on to a more serious subject, it was obviously the biggest story this week, and that being the passing of Scott Hall at the age of 63. And I guess, Rich, following it during that period, did it surprise you at all the level of coverage Scott Hall received, or is this just more so of a reaffirmation of just what a big period that was, and whether it was your childhood watching him in AWA, WWF, and then your teenage years in WCW? Like, this was a sizable figure within professional wrestling, and the coverage has certainly reflected that over the past couple of days.
Yeah, you didn't know this, but I mentioned this on Everything with Wade over at the Torch, and I'll share with the Post folks because I think you do a really good job of integrating wrestling and people, not just the topics of the day. And so I shared that I don't drink, I don't do drugs, and that's because I have a lot of addicts in my family. And Scott Hall's the same age as my dad. My dad struggled with alcohol and drugs most of his life. And so as I saw Scott Hall, the wrestler, I really projected with him and Jake Roberts a lot of the relationship with my father, and always consistently hoping for the best like I do for my dad. And so seeing him pass at 63 for me personally was jarring, because I know the changes my dad made in his life and the struggles that are still there. And then I compare that with the stories that people were talking about with Scott, and it's the same person. And so for that, it really resonated with me. But then from a wrestling standpoint, to see the New York Times, to see guys like Joe Budden do podcasts and do long obituaries on him, he was just more than a pro wrestler. I think he was part of that zeitgeist, that culture of the 90s. Just like when you look at Criss Cross or you look at any of those other things that were hallmarks of the early, mid to late 90s, Scott Hall is going to be that guy that stands out there. And so I think he was deserved in getting his praise, and I do really appreciate that folks are showing the whole person and not lionizing him, because I think the biggest part of his story is, for warts and all, what he brought was worthy of praise.
I completely agree with that. I think that's naturally people tend to go that direction when someone passes away, is kind of, put the light on all the positives, especially when it's someone that you grew up looking at as a larger than life star. But the Scott Hall story is one of all of those past problems that he had and the struggle that he went through. And to eliminate that is to not properly reflect on the entirety of Scott Hall. This is somebody that, and I think as a society, Rich, we have also, I think, advanced greatly in terms of how we look at substance abuse issues, and treating it more of a disease rather than just making poor decisions to hurt others. It's a lot more deep than that. And we have a more informed view of Scott Hall once he has publicly disclosed, like the 1983 murder and the foundation of that trauma that informs a lot of, the problems that he would go through and battle his whole life.
Yeah, and I really appreciated that he was a guy, and Wade made that very astute comment when he interviewed him years ago that kind of like some of his friends mentioned, he wouldn't have done that unless other people vouched for him because he was a very insular person. His circle was small. You even notice with the wrestlers who have said things in passing, it hasn't always been the most detailed things. It was more or less people being respectfully distant. And I think that's him. I think that was Scott Hall. I never met or interacted with him other than the night before All In Las Vegas. I'm thinking I'm getting the right one. No, that would have been in Chicago.
In Chicago?
No.
Double or Nothing in Vegas?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking Vegas. No. All in Chicago. I'm sorry. My brain sometimes doesn't work, y'all. He was in the hotel lobby for the StarCast stuff.
Right.
And he was just all smiles and talking to people. And Wade is like, I've never seen him like this before, especially around fans. And it was just really cool to just be there for 2 hours in the hotel lobby and just BS with Scott Hall and not have it as something where he wasn't guarded. People aren't asking him questions that are going to kind of piss him off. It was just talking, like just randomly about stuff in the area, about things in Chicago in that area. And I really appreciated the fact that when he talked about the murder, when people see things like Dark Side of the Ring, you get a piece of the person, but I don't think you get to see the whole package until you get this, sadly, after their death, you get this kaleidoscope of opinions from people. Because you're not going to, obviously, you're going to have the odd jerk that's going to say, well, this is what happens when you do this. But I really like the informed opinion that Bret Hart brought up of this is the price we've paid for 300-day years and riding hard and not having that introspection, not having, as sad and as horrible as the pandemic has been, one of the things that came out of it that can hopefully help the wrestling industry is you don't have to do all these dates. If you're going to do house shows, do the odd spots, but you don't need your guys and women on the road for 300 days a year. You don't need them in a position where they have to be just absolutely knackered and just beaten down for you to kind of have the money you need to make and the money they need to make.
I think a byproduct of that, and that's not just during the pandemic, but I think of this generation too, is, less of those dates. It's more of that ability to hit that off switch. I mean, we're talking about that 80s insane period where these guys are these figures 300 days a year, and it's just the person and the character really blend together, and you don't have that ability to separate the two. And I think that would obviously play a lot when you're talking about drug dependency, alcohol abuse, just the whole gamut of what it is. And a lot of those 80s figures, it really, they just went into this hole of mixing the performer and the human just became one and the same.
Yeah, and you see so many of the stories from the families of I didn't see my dad, or I got into wrestling because that was the way I could see my dad, with Dustin Runnels talking about his relationship with Dusty. And so much of that's changed. So much of that fundamentally has changed. And I'm hoping that as they go through with this new generation, I think there's been this misnomer that everything's perfect. Or, some of the old guys, that transitional period where like the guys like Taker would say, well, these kids playing their video games and I can't believe they're not talking about the business. Like, well, they are, but it might be on a call like this. They might be Zooming with each other. They may be on FaceTime. Like Cody talked a lot about that when he was in AEW. He'd have this group of people he'd FaceTime and go over his promos and kind of workshop with them. Use the technology. You don't have to be sat in a cramped, smoky arena in order for you to have the experience.
Last thing on Scott Hall, when you look at things, whether it be in the ring or behind the scenes, what do you think that ceiling was that he could have reached, including like outside, like behind the scenes? Like, could he have contributed in a higher way, especially in like a WWE capacity?
So many of these guys, John, have stories of Scott Hall gave me this one tweak and it fundamentally changed my career, like Sting.
Yeah.
Tanahashi just did a tribute to him in New Japan, did a job for him in New Japan. Like, so many things that he's done. I think a lot about what Regal said to Bryan Danielson. If he didn't have those demons, if he didn't have those traumas, he could have been not only a top-notch wrestler, but he would have been a top. Not even with the brain he had, he could have been even more of a Svengali, or more of a kind of like that old man on the hill you would go to, kind of almost akin to Dusty Rhodes' role before he passed, where you could just sit down, and if he trusts you, he might say some things that are gonna hurt you, but at the end of the day, it's for the idea of fixing you. Like I brought up the example of, Big Bad Kaiju on Twitter. He met him early in his career, and he said, "You smile too much. You got a great body, you got a great look. You smile too much." Grows out his beard, grows his hair out, adds a little bit more of a scowl, a little meaner in the ring, better wrestler. Someone could have taken that and taken it personal. It's like, what does Scott Hall know about me? Forget this guy. And then you're missing out on some wisdom that a guy who, when he's going to give those kernels, he's doing it from a position where he wants to help and not necessarily just be a jerk.
Yeah, I think that, I made the comparison earlier this week, and granted, it's like it's a different setup in WWE, but you look at him as like really understanding that WWE way of television, of producing, that Pat Patterson filled that role of just maybe making like a little suggestion on a finish, or just going left instead of right at this particular direction. He seemed to really hone in on just little ways to maximize your entrance, to do little things that were going to pay big dividends. And his career was full of these little things that are just mannerisms that you so associate with Scott Hall, and emphasizing that to the camera. We move on now to Jay Briscoe, and him and his brother were on the Battleground podcast. Now, this podcast has since been removed, and in the podcast, he once again apologized for the 2013 tweet that has really followed Jay Briscoe, and by association, his brother, from 2013. For those that were not familiar, at the time, this was the same year where Delaware was legalizing same-sex marriage within the state, and Jay Briscoe had made a tweet about threatening to shoot anyone that taught his kids that there's nothing wrong with same-sex marriage. He did come out with an apology shortly thereafter, and did donate money from 2 of his future ROH events to a outfit. And this came up earlier this week when Fightful Select reported that at least one person of influence at Warner Media does not want the duo in AEW, and citing the 2013 tweet that came out from Jay Briscoe. So it's very hard to look at this, Rich, and I do think like a component that comes down to all of this is where someone of like a person at Warner Media looks at what is the value of a Jay Briscoe versus what is the potential backlash that we receive from doing something like this. And that is going to come into play here. And you're looking at, I think it's those that are around Jay Briscoe that will know what kind of individual this person is 9 years later, removed, and being truly remorseful for it.
Yeah, it's a tough situation, especially when we only see it from the outside. We see it from Twitter. We see it from an apology. We hear it from a podcast. Because I am always stuck in this quandary of, I want to give people, not just in wrestling but in life, you want to give them a chance to make amends, or prove that they're not the person they were. Because he even mentioned in the statement they put out that he loves all people. No, there was a time with the Briscoe brothers. I have a Dim Boys t-shirt from Ring of Honor in my closet somewhere in my house that has the stars and bars on it.
Right.
And so he's a guy that has tried to apologize. He's tried to make amends. AEW has had guys who have said inflammatory things and done inflammatory things, and kind of have been either put on sensitivity training, or not necessarily exonerated, but in a position where it's not talked about, with Jay Lethal, for instance. And I think with the Briscoes, particularly with Jay, and forgive me for not being aware beforehand, did they cite any reason why they pulled the podcast?
I didn't know. I don't know what reason the podcast was pulled, but the transcription was up from Fightful. But yeah, no reason why this was pulled down.
It's really tough. I always go back to when you have something like a Terry Bollea, who said what he said in terms of like, I'd only let my daughter sleep with a black man if they were famous or had a lot of money, and then come back with, see all these pictures with black people I took pictures of, and I said I was sorry without ever saying I'm sorry, and then get to the stage of I said I was sorry, and then it's just like, forget it. And then you have a guy here who's made apologies, several apologies, really gone out of his way, donated money. I'm not in the LGBTQIA community. I can't take the apology. And again, bringing Jericho in. They're Joe Rogan saying something, and then Jericho's in the Instagram comments, forgiven. You can't forgive him. That's not that's not your spot. So it's not my place to say he's forgiven, but I do think, as a professional wrestler, we talked about in the 80s and early 90s the push and the road from 90s, 2000s, and now into 2020s and beyond. There is as much importance to maintain your public and private thoughts and be responsible for them as it is your character. And so I struggle, honestly, John, with the line on how you do that and do it accurately with every person. Because I think there's always these vacillations in what is accepted, what isn't accepted, what is pushed, what isn't pushed, as far as like misdeeds, and how we have an accounting of them.
I completely echo that, and I think each one is going to be its own case that you have to sort of, judge, and it becomes difficult because in the one sense, like, there is a reason for a Jay Briscoe to come out and to apologize if it's affecting his livelihood, and you try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt that they are being sincere, and it's those that are going to be closest to Jay Briscoe that will know the true character of Jay Briscoe, yet it's your audience that does not have that intimate knowledge of a Jay Briscoe that a Warner Media is going to be selling this individual to. So you're left with an audience that ultimately is judging if they believe he is sincere or not, and not having the resources and that kind of relationship to truly know it. I look at something like a tweet and this, we can tie this to a Scott Hall too. I would like to be in a society where people can get second chances, and that poor mistakes are not going to be, career ending for some people. But you always have to look at, what is the offense and what is going to be the public's punishment for that. Yeah, it becomes very tricky.
And it's also, I also don't want it to be, and that's where I appreciate his apology. It wasn't something that came from a place of, so often, especially when I cover like football, there's the idea of during the draft, someone may say something, and he was a kid then. And by kid, it's like he was 17, 16, and he's now a 20-year-old. Or even with some of the statements made by, like I mentioned before, Terry Bollea, I didn't know better, I was 40-something. Like, there has to be that accounting. In Jay's apology, at no point does he say, I qualified in this X way. It's like, this was offensive, this is vile, I know it's vile, I've tried to change. I think that, but again, you get caught, like you said, John, in the, isn't that best for your business to say that? But it's in the notes app, everyone comes with the note. He's like, my heart, I don't have a racist bone in my body, this, that, the third. It really is tough, and I just default on trying to I'd rather be the idiot. Like, I know a lot of times, I know Regal in that interview mentioned, like, not using the word mark. I'd rather be the mark and give someone a second chance and let them prove me to be foolish for giving them that, than to just default on everyone is just duplicitous and a scumbag.
Yeah, and you're never going to have, like, 100% of a verdict either way. It's always going to be a mix. There will be some that are not comfortable with this, and especially if you're in the LGBTQ community, like, you have every right to not accept that. It's not a comment that's specifically targeting you or I, but right. Again, it's tricky. It's somebody that you have to look at, and this is something that continues to follow him this many years later. Just some quick news and notes before we wrap things up. The New Japan Cup continued on Thursday with Will Ospreay and Zack Sabre Jr. Advancing to the quarterfinals. So we have 3 quarterfinal matches set, and then the final second round matches happening on Friday with Hiromu Takahashi against Evil and Shingo Takagi against Chase Owens. And do you expect, like, by the time we're getting to next weekend, Rich, for the final 4 of the New Japan Cup, that interest is going to ramp up? Because it seems like a tournament that people are keeping an eye on, but not with a great attention to what is happening over there.
Yeah, it is definitely a case of that internet meme of, I'm sorry or I'm proud of you. I am not reading all of that, because 48 people in a tournament was something. I told waiters, like, listen, I don't know what I'll meet it. I was like, I'll see him in the semifinals or maybe the quarterfinals. I've been watching some of them. I think Ospreay's been doing really well. Shingo, as always, is bringing it. I think folks will pull in when they see the final 8, final 4. I think they have a really good field right now. It's whittled down. I anticipate they're going to keep some of the House of Torture / Bullet Club folks in just to continue that story, which then instantly kind of brings it down a little bit to me. But I hope so, because when you look at the other members of that field, I think Ospreay and ZSJ alone are going to be worth seeing as we get into these more intense matches.
Yeah, you're getting into the big stuff now, so we will see if that enhances interest for the New Japan Cup. NXT 2.0 on Tuesday night, they did 624,000 viewers and a 0.14 in the demo. Not too much difference from last week, although up 15% in 18 to 34 with women outdrawing men in that particular demo. In Canada, they did 65,000 viewers as they continue to build up for Stand and Deliver. And NXT 2.0, are you looking at, this is the most integration we are getting from the main roster? Is that helping NXT for you, Rich? Do you think that this version of NXT 2.0 is finding its footing this many months in? Where do you kind of stand on NXT 2.0?
I think it's starting to find its footing. I think they're also coming to terms with what that footing results in from a rating standpoint. And as a result, by integrating it, I think that makes it less the Isle of Misfit Toys or a full training ground, but another brand. I don't think it'll ever get to the heights of where it was a couple of years ago, where folks are in the Royal Rumble, they got the champion, and that's an option for someone to choose when they win the Rumble, allegedly. And right now, Dolph Ziggler is no longer in the position of being the star or starlet from the 40s, sitting on a couch smoking a cigarette, talking about the days when they were on top, like he had that funk of a couple of years ago. So him being in this role is helping him. That's in turn helping Braun Breaker and some of the other guys. You have Ciampa moving on. You have, for Stand and Deliver, Grayson Waller is just... I have fun watching him. He has really surprised me in terms of what he's doing. And I really think Tony D'Angelo has owned that character in a way I haven't seen since the 90s. It's the best part of Terry Taylor screaming, "I'm the Red Rooster," but without the soul gone from his eyes as he says it, as the microphone's in his face. So I really appreciate that. And I think as they go forward with the women, you have so many options for folks to bring up. I just want to know, especially with this new crop that they're bringing in, how are they going to, I know the British term is like bleed in, but how are you going to mix in someone like a Roxy with Saray and company, as well as some of the athletes who might not have wrestling backgrounds? Because I think that's the one mistake they made. When you have someone coming in that has so little wrestling, and then you bring them in, and you need other folks who are very new to the business to carry them along as well. So I think mixing in some of these vets like Rude and Ziggler has been very helpful for everyone's growth, if only just to have conversations with them in the back.
Yes. Missed opportunity, maybe getting a farewell speech from Pete Dunne to get a "Thank you, Butch" chant from the audience.
Listen, Butch does what he does. He's his own man now. I heard that. I was at my son's hockey game Friday, and I looked on Twitter during the intermission, and I was like, Butch? They turned him into Butch? Like, you could even just call them like Peter. Like, everyone always loved Peter, and but Butch? Like, he'd already made Pete tough. Like, Pete was going to be the kid in, like, the class with the sniffles. Like, now he's, like, this hard British strong man. And Butch, man, it's... My one prescription for WWE is to have some of Vince's inner circle watch more Guy Ritchie movies and less Newsies. And I think they'll be a lot easier. Like I said, Bricktop. Or, I put up the video of Bullet Tooth Tony. He's like, why is his name Bullet Tooth Tony? Because he eats bullets. Like, it's not that hard. Like, you can do this. But Butch, man, like, that's a bushwhacker. Like, maybe that's where they're going with this.
If ever there was a name generator from Vince McMahon right on the spot, just eyeing this guy from head to toe and coming up with Butch, I mean, that would have been the one to be a fly on the wall for as he just arrives at his conclusion for Pete Dunne on the main roster. But the last thing we've got here, notable date, 20 years ago today, was Wrestlemania X8, as their war on Roman numerals continued for the second year in a row. From Toronto at the formerly named Skydome, now Rogers Center, of course featuring two men fighting over a shampoo commercial, as well as The Rock versus Hulk Hogan. I just want to ask you, Rich, do you recall where you were for this show, and does Hogan and Rock hold a significant place in your memory of WWE matches?
Man, it does. It was one of those matches where and we've seen a couple of them, the Shawn Michaels Hogan match, the kind of more recently, some of the stuff in Impact with, I want to say that was Austin Aries, where the story behind the story of the match was as important as the match itself. And so seeing that and having The Rock note after the fact that that was an education, like the Masters of Pro Wrestling school he never thought he was going to get until he got in that match with Hogan. I just seen, with Scott Hall's passing, a friend on Twitter put up the one of the situations that led to that match where he was giving Hogan an autograph for his son. And in true WWE fashion, instead of getting the autograph from the guy you don't like, he starts talking crap about him with The Rock 2 inches away from him. And kind of off they went. And so, yeah, that match holds a lot in my heart because I thought it was great to see, clearly, your brethren and sestrin there kind of like take to Hogan. And Hogan kind of take on that role, and Rock could do nothing about it. Like, how do you handle that? You know, I think about when Rock and Cena had that same situation with their promo leading to their first match, where it's like you really don't know how to react except for I have to stay in character, but at the same time, this dude is upstaging me. And so it was masterful. And in terms of just general fandom, I thought it was a really good match, just like back when I was younger watching Hogan and The Warrior, where it isn't going to be a moves fest. It really was about the emotion and reaction of the fans and kind of that changing of the guard. And in this case, it was, you know, getting that back door to Hollywood being able to become the immortal Hulk Hogan and kind of have that run with Edge and everything he did after that.
Yeah, it was one to just seeing like at the Access the day before, just happening to be there as like Hogan's like going through the Access exhibit through with a camera on him, and dude, these fans are just falling over themselves at it's a small sample, but you really got the sense of what was going to be the reaction the next night. And it was an incredibly heated match inside of the building. And you've had people like Cody that has called it what he believes is the best match of all time. So it's one that I wouldn't go so far as to say that, but nonetheless, it's a historical match, and one that I think a lot of performers would have tried to emulate and aspire to that kind of degree that those two had on that particular night. Before we get out of here, a few super chats coming our way from Danny Mitchell. I just want to tip the Post Fellas for being the classiest on social media. Love the 4 Pillars shirt. Appreciate all you do. And if you want to hear WH Park chat about that 4 Pillars shirt, pre-controversy, he was on with one Rich Fann this past weekend. So you can go check that out over at the PW Torch website. And then we have got a few more here. We've got from Easy Attack, sending in a $20 super chat just cuz. Wow, Easy Attack. Thank you very much. Very kind of you. And then, he adds on here, I think what makes Jay Briscoe's comments so bad was that he talked about actively wanting to commit violence against the LGBT community.
Yep.
Also, Brandon Thornton on NWA Pod. I think he means Thurston, but yes, he will be on the upcoming NWA podcast. That's coming from Chris Ely. Yeah, like that's a part of it. How serious you take those comments, I didn't take it literally, but that was in the tweet about threatening to shoot people. So that's, a aspect of the tweet as well that you have to take into consideration on top
And then when
of
you think about it in the future, you had the Miami shooting at the nightclub.
Right.
And you have had those people who had those ideations. And clearly I'm not suggesting that he did, but by saying it, that's the first step. You always do that backtrack. And, in my day job, we always try to look at like, okay, is there a student in need? Is there an emergent thing? What are the signs? And that Chris is absolutely right. Like that is something. And yes, hashtag WH was right.
WH, a man that is seldom wrong, and he won't admit it if he ever is wrong. Rich, this has been great to have you on. I do want to give you the floor for anyone that wants to go catch any of your great work over at the Torch.
Yeah, sure. So typically I do a couple of free columns every day on every month on PW Torch, but I do a monthly column with the subscription. I also do a lot of podcasts. My God, a lot of podcasts. So if you search on anywhere where you get such fine podcasts from Post, you could also find either the Deep Dive with myself and Will Cooling, the East Coast Cast with myself and Travis Bryant, Sean Radican and I do Radican Worldwide. I won't bust your mic on that one. And, of course, on the VIP side, I do everything with Rich Fann with Wade Keller. where we talk about a variety of topics every week and kind of do it around the horn style, like I just did with John for maybe 60, 70 minutes, and then listener questions and other topics as they pop up. Most likely Succession. I'm now trying to sneak Winning Time in because my goal is now.
Oh, I'm on top of Winning Time now. Yeah, I caught up on the weekend.
I would love for Adam McKay to do a Winning Time documentary for Vince McMahon, because nothing would blow me up more than Pat Patterson looking at the screen and say, and this is the point where Vince doesn't know it, but we secretly hidden all of the things in the office that can make it end badly with this meeting. Or, Brian Pillman looks at the camera, he's like, I'm not signing with them, but I'm going to make them think it because I want to go with this guy. And and if you all get a chance, please, Winning Time on HBO, that would be my other plug. And I really should end by being a professional. Follow me if you want on Twitter, or at least interact with me at Rich_Fann, Fann, and I'm happy to chat.
He's one of the best out there, everybody. Rich Fann joining us today. We'll definitely have to do this again sometime soon. We will be back. Wei Ting and Jordan Goodman are going to be live at 3 Eastern today with the Wellness Policy. That will be live for patrons and then up for free for everyone on the Cafe feed. And then we're back tomorrow, this same time slot. Wei Ting will return with myself, and we will go through whatever is going on in the world of pro wrestling. For Rich Fann, I am John Pollock, and thank you for tuning in to the Post Daily News Show.